The former Texas officer responsible for the death of Atatiana Jefferson has been sentenced following his manslaughter conviction last week. Here's a reminder of the tragic incident from the officer's body cam.
Put your hands up, show me your hands.
You saw the video there, the tragic video of the police body cam shooting into the window of an innocent woman defending her home, standing in a window. He didn't identify himself. There was no reason to shoot into that house and take an innocent life of an innocent black woman sitting there responding, trying to figure out what the noise was. The former Texas officer responsible for the death of Atatiana Jefferson has been sentenced, like we said, following his manslaughter conviction last week. The former Fort Worth officer, Aaron Dean, was sentenced to 11 years, 10 months in prison on Tuesday in a Tarrant County court for the 2019 shooting and killing of 28-year-old Jefferson in her own home. His conviction is believed to be the first time a Tarrant County law enforcement officer or former officer has been found guilty of a killing committed while on duty. So that is a little bit of justice and progress to the justice system. To recap the incident, per Reuters, Jefferson was tragically shot dead by Dean, who is white, while standing in her home with a handgun after hearing noises outside. Afterward, Dean resigned from the force, and police later charged him with murder. Brad Brooks from Reuters reporting that. Dean and his partner, Carol Darch, had gone to Jefferson's home after a concerned neighbor called police to say her front door was open. Jefferson was playing video games with her then 8-year-old nephew when Dean arrived and crept around the back of the home, gun drawn, according to his arrest warrant and body cam video. Jefferson's death took place about 7 months before the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer who knelt on his neck for over 8 minutes. Floyd's death led to global demonstrations against racism and police brutality. The Fort Worth Police Department had said in 2019 that Dean violated a series of police policies. Dean's attorney said he fired in self-defense, but prosecutors had argued there was no evidence of him seeing a gun in Jefferson's hand before firing through the bedroom window. And even if he had, so what? It's your own home. He didn't identify himself. Conviction and sentencing details per the Daily Beast. Dean was initially charged with murder, but a jury, which featured no black jurors, determined last Thursday that the killing was an act of manslaughter. Dean's sentence is more than 8 years below the sentence prosecutors had pushed for after Dean was convicted of manslaughter last week, but it is at least significantly more severe than probation, the punishment his defense had lobbied for this week. And of course, guess what? Former Officer Dean had a troubling past. That's right, troubling details about Dean's past surfaced during the sentencing hearing. A psychologist who evaluated Dean before he was hired by the Fort Worth Police Department testified that Dean was not fit to be a cop, a determination that was shared with the department, but ignored. The psychologist, Kyle Clayton, said Dean exhibited grandiose, domineering, over-controlling personality traits, which made him more likely to engage in behaviors that would put himself and others at risk. And then per the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, prosecutors argued that Dean was a gung-ho cop who wasn't sure what he saw through the window, and that he was relieved to find Jefferson's gun after he shot her. The officer didn't identify himself, didn't give Jefferson time to respond to his command to put her hands up, and did not even perform CPR on the dying woman. Jefferson graduated from Xavier University with a biology degree and was saving money to attend medical school. Those details are so important because they remind you these are human beings that are amazing, contributing members of society that are trying to live their lives and help society. She was saving to attend medical school. She had moved into her mother's home to care for her while she was ill and was helping raise her then 8-year-old nephew, Zion Carr, while his mother was also in the hospital. Prosecutors said she didn't know who was in her yard and had a right to have a gun to protect herself and her nephew. Of course she did. And this is the tragic outcome that her life was taken, but at least one of the rare instances in this country, unfortunately, that justice, to at least some degree, comes to an officer of the law for taking someone's life, proving that officers are not infallible, and sometimes even for marginalized communities, some degree of justice can be had. A.B., I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here, considering the fact that they even ended up at this home because a neighbor called saying that the door was open, right? Getting fresh air at a time when you're hanging out with an 8-year-old should not be the cause of a death sentence. So let's start there. What we know just from his actions in this particular instance is that this is not the first time that he's done something out of line and out of protocol with the police agency, right? Giving him 11 years, I'm a strong advocate for give people the time they deserve, but in this sense, it kind of hurts, considering the fact that there was an 8-year-old boy who was present for this, who will live with this for the rest of his life, who will feel some sort of hurt and confusion by how this whole situation played out for the rest of his life. In addition to that, it makes it so much harder for people to trust the police. Because when you call out of concern for your neighbor, right? Because her door is open and you're not sure if she's being burglarized or not, but you call a non-threatening number, right? You call a number that's like non-emergency, I'm just checking to make sure everything's okay, and someone ends up deceased, it makes it less likely that citizens will call the police when there is a real emergency, because you just don't know what the outcome is going to be. And this is why we need to be more vigilant about who we hire as police officers. I think that this entire department also needs to be held accountable. If they received information from a psychologist before this man was hired that he was not fit to be a police officer, he should have never been hired. That is the whole point of having all the checks and balances when you go to be a police officer, to make sure you are proper and you are fit for this position. This is why they do psychological backgrounds. This is why they do fingerprinting, right? This is why they do the lie detector test, even though they're not credible in court. But this is why you do these things, to make sure that when you hire people who are here to protect and serve, that is exactly what they're going to do. So now we walk away with another Black life gone because of an irresponsible police officer. But then we still in the same breath have people who will argue police lives matter and blue lives matter and things like that. We matter too. And in order for us to matter, you gotta do your job, and you gotta do your job well, and you have to do your job fairly. Everything about this was wrong. I think the department also needs to be scrutinized for this, because y'all were the start of this tragedy, and this is how it has ended.
So many brilliant points there, A.B. I mean, their front and back doors were open because they were cooking hamburgers that they burnt, and they were trying to air out the place. And cooking hamburgers for your family should obviously not result in death. And you also make the great point that 11 years is not the right amount of time for a murder like this in cold blood for no reason. And a sad state and a sad commentary on the state of our country, that even has to be received as good news and not received as, wow, another light punishment. Instead, it's celebrated that at least some amount of justice. But 11 years does not suffice for cutting down this life for literally no reason. And you're right, if an officer gets a bad psychological review before becoming an officer, rather a candidate, and they do not need a second chance. You don't have to be a police officer. Nobody has a right to be an officer of the law. You find someone else. You fund them better, you pay them more in that community. If you can't get people to apply, whatever you have to do to get the officers needed, you do not put people on the force that lead to such tragic outcomes. That is not acceptable.